So I was sent this video numerous times on Facebook. It was sent to my inbox. I was tagged in it. It's been everywhere. And it's this guy named Croff. He's part of a group called Archduke. It's him and a guy named Jacob Denzel. I'm not quite sure if they're rappers or singers or what, but it has a lot of views on Facebook. If you see the thumbnail before you, you can see it says, "This guy destroys Trump in 5 minutes." Now, I watched it and there were a lot of things that I found issue with. There were a lot of inconsistencies, a lot of lies, a lot of half-truths. So I want to go through each one point by point right now. So let's get straight to it.
What's good? My name is Charity Croff. When speaking on Mexicans, Donald Trump said, and I quote, "They're rapists, and I assume some are good people."
Okay, so first of all, you got the quote wrong. You took a piece of it, extrapolated it, and then expounded on it as if that part was the full quote, but it wasn't. First of all, you got to put it in its proper context. Trump was at like a meeting or dinner or some kind of speech where he was speaking to people in the crowd, and he was saying, "Hey, Mexico, they're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending rapists, they're sending murderers, etc." Which means that they're not sending the good people that they have in their country that makes their country not be a third world country, because contrary to popular belief, Mexico is not a third world country. We just have more money than them, that's all. But my point is, he was saying that they're not sending their best people, they're sending people that have problems, and then we got to deal with them. And it's not just Mexican citizens, people from all over the world. Do you know that at the border, I think it was in 2014, they caught 400,000 people from 148 different countries. So Mexico is allowing a lot of that traffic to come through their country. That's what he means when they're saying they're not sending their best.
Well, according to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, 73.9% of all rapists are white, 22.8% are black, and 3.3% are other. That very small other would include Mexicans, Asians, Native Americans, and every other race that is not black or white.
Well, in your statistics here, you're not really sure if those numbers lump in Hispanics as white, because in many legal forms, many surveys and whatnot, oftentimes you'll have Hispanics lumped in as white, because the reality is a lot of the mestizos, which is about 80% of the Mexican population, kind of appear as white. It's only a small minority of them that are actually native, like the Aztecs, etc.
So no, Mexicans are not the root of the rape problem in America.
Trump never said that Mexicans are the root problem with rape in America. He was just saying that the Mexican government brings people that have a lot of problems, that are rapists, murderers, etc., through that southern border, many of whom may not even be Mexican citizens. It's just like what Cuba did with the boat lift, where you had Castro brag about flushing the toilets of Cuba upon the shores of the United States.
I know what you may be thinking. Of course, the majority of rapists will be white because the majority of the country is white. That doesn't mean that Mexicans may not rape at a higher rate than white people. Well, according to the BJS National Crime Victimization Survey.
Well, look, the way the surveys happen is that they basically call you at your house, or they may go to your house. A lot of times they probably just call you and then they ask you questions. Now in the survey, are you going to be 100% honest? See, the stats you had before, those were actual like convictions, people that were in jail. But with a survey, you're just asking people for what has happened to them, and you're not really sure if you're going to get a lie, a truth, a half truth, or whatever.
For 2013, whites accounted for 71% of all sexual assaults documented, while they only make up 63% of the U.S. population.
I think you made a mistake here. Am I the only one that caught it? If what you say is true about whites committing 71% of sexual assaults despite only being 63% of the U.S. population, then what does it say about your earlier stat? Do you realize you put a stat up that said 22% of rapes were committed by blacks, even though blacks are only 13% of the population? I know you're kind of a pro-black kind of guy, but see, that right there, I don't think you caught. And it kind of kills the argument that you're going to make a little bit later.
Latinos, on the other hand, only accounted for 9%, far below their total percentage of 17% of the country. When speaking on ISIS, Donald Trump says, and I quote, "I would bomb the shit out of them. There'd be nothing left, and I'd take their oil." Unquote. Well, if you didn't know, ISIS stands for the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. To be more accurate, when Donald Trump says that he'd bomb the shit out of them, he's specifically referring to the oil fields, which seem to be the organization's primary source of income. Well, if you know anything about Iraq and Syria, then you know that a huge portion of their economy is based on this oil.
Okay, then if what you say about the Middle East, Iraq, and whatnot, that their economies are dependent upon oil, why would you let ISIS continue to have it? You know that ISIS is not giving that oil to the people that need it, or the money from the oil. They're taking that oil and they're using it to fund their own operations, to fund terror, to kill people that look just like you and me. So yes, you need to take the oil from them or destroy it to destroy their economic base. Therefore, it'll be more difficult for them to be able to move around. It's just that simple. You can't say, oh, it's going to kill the economy. The economy is being killed by ISIS because they're taking the oil and not delivering it to the economy.
According to the Pew Research Center, 91% of Iraqis are not in favor of ISIS.
If 91% of Iraqis are not in favor of ISIS, then why not bomb them?
That being said, bombing the shit out of them and taking their oil would completely ruin the lives of 33.4 million Iraqis, or however many would be left alive after this attack. And let's keep in mind that 91% of these people are innocent people that do not favor ISIS in any way. As far as immigration, Donald Trump plans on deporting the more than 11 million undocumented illegals in our country and build a wall between America and Mexico.
Great. Fantastic. Out, out, out.
He's doing this because, according to him, undocumented illegals are costing us more than $200 billion a year and taking away jobs from American-born citizens. Well, I have found no research to support his claims that illegals are costing us $200 billion a year.
Well, you say you can't find any research to back up that 200 billion number, and I kind of give you that one. I was not able to find anything either. However, when I did a simple Google search for illegal alien cost to taxpayers, I did find something. I found a number that says 113 billion, and I post the actual quote on the screen before you, and I put a link to that quote in the description box below. Illegal immigrants cost us a lot of money because what they do, they come here, they set up shop, they work under the table, and then they take that money and then they repatriate it back to their country of origin, which a lot of times Mexico, but it could be somewhere in Europe, it could be somewhere in Africa, it could be anywhere. Like I said, you have 400,000 people caught at the border, not including people that have just been gone through the border, which who knows how many get through every year, but you have 400,000 caught at the border from 148 different countries. So illegal aliens drain the money. The money that they create is often offset by the money that they take up in other ways, which I get to a little bit later, and also what they send back to their home country.
The highest I found was according to the United States Census Bureau current population survey, which said, under current law, all unlawful immigrant households together have an aggregate annual deficit of around $54.5 billion. But let's make it fun and assume it was $200 billion. We must first consider that 1 out of every 3 farm workers in America is an undocumented illegal immigrant. According to the USDA, the agriculture industry contributes $835 billion to the U.S. gross domestic product yearly. So if we assume that removing 1/3 of the employees would at least affect 1/3 of the outcome, then by deporting all illegal immigrants, we are literally losing out on $278 billion of our national income. And that's if we're being nice and we assume that it would just affect 1/3 of the product. But realistically, if we were to fire 1/3 of all farmers, our entire agriculture industry would literally collapse.
Democrats in 1860, well, we can't free the slaves, our farms will collapse. Democrats in 2016, well, we can't send illegals back home, our farms will collapse. Farmers are just doing what is most effective price-wise under the law. If you send illegals back home, what they'll do is they'll mechanize. They have machines right now that pick strawberries. Many of the human workers are not necessary. The only reason why they're there is because farmers are too cheap to mechanize. But once you say, hey, you got to go home, then they have no choice. And then Americans will also be able to get those opportunities. You say that Americans don't want to do their job, but how do you really know what all Americans want to do?
And I know what you're thinking. Well, we could just fill those positions with Americans that need jobs. No, actually both Alabama and Georgia tried to do mass deportations of illegals and it failed miserably both times. They couldn't find anybody to fill all those job positions because most Americans don't want to spend 12 hours in the fields picking crops. That being said, both states had to revoke their decision so that the immigrants would come back so that their farming industry wouldn't completely collapse.
Well, much of the reason why it failed or they had problems because of the implementation of it and also because of federal overreach.
Georgia lost over $150 million worth of crops in the very short, very small level deportation that they did in comparison to what Trump is trying to do. Not to mention the fact that the idea of getting the resources, warrants, officers, and everything necessary to search the entire country, find 11 million undocumented people, and literally kick them out of the country is just like inconceivable.
That's not true. It won't cost that much. You're looking at it from a very myopic point of view, but I'll get to that a little bit later.
You would literally have to dismantle families and chase people through the streets and into their houses and forcibly put them on planes and send them out of the country.
Nice try with the emotional appeal, but look, my heart is stone cold like Steve Austin. You can't trick me with these emotional attacks trying to get me to cry and whatnot. I'm not with it. If you're here illegally and you get deported, that's your own fault. Out, out, out.
Even if something as preposterous as that could work, according to the Wall Street Journal, it would take $400 billion to do it.
Again, it won't cost that much. Let's move on.
Undocumented illegals are not eligible for Social Security, Medicare, Earned Income Tax Credit, food stamps, welfare.
Now, that was an outright lie. I'm not really sure if you did some research on that or not. Illegals are most certainly eligible for welfare. Yes, they are. They also get emergency medical treatment. I've seen a stat as high as 62% of households headed up by illegal immigrants get at least one form of welfare services. California right now is trying to get illegals on Obamacare. So you can't just say that they're not getting any kind of welfare. right? And this brings me back to what I was saying about how to get them out and how you can deport without costing so much money. If you cut off the welfare benefits that many of them get, then you'll see a lot of them self-deport. If they can't come over here and leech off of the system while they're trying to work under the table and send money back home to their country of origin, then a lot of them would not come. The promises of amnesty and welfare are magnets to attract a lot of people that really shouldn't be here, that overwhelm our already strained services. The country is $20 trillion in debt, and you want to bring in more people from the third world, people that don't speak English, people that don't have any skill because you think they're going to work on the farm. Okay.
They contribute over $11.6 billion yearly to our economy and spending. They pay a higher effective tax rate than the richest 1% of the country, and our entire $835 billion agriculture industry is literally based on their labor, like it's founded upon it.
So there you go, arguing for more cheap labor. Higher effective tax rate. I mean, what does that really mean? Does that mean they pay more taxes than people in the top brackets of taxes? I think it's not. Did you know that people in the top 1% pay nearly half of all taxes, and people in the lower 80 barely pay any?
Economically speaking, undocumented immigrants are arguably one of the most productive, beneficial aspects of American society. We should be begging for more of them.
No thanks, they can go home now.
Finally, Donald Trump wants to secure our borders not only from undocumented immigrants, but from potential Muslim terrorists. Like literally ban all Muslims from entering. Listen, this large gray box represents all the gun-related injuries that happened in America in 2015. The smaller gray box represents the gun-related deaths of 2015. And that little tiny black box represents the mass shootings that happened in 2016 that we would consider terror. 0.5% of gun violence is related to terrorism.
Now, this chart here, this gun injuries, this gun death chart is very dishonest, because gun injuries can mean accidental shootings. It can mean people that shot somebody in self-defense. You really don't know what this chart is. And it could also have suicide in there. I'm not quite sure if this chart has suicide or not, but that's also a big part of the chart. It could also have attempted suicide. You really don't know what these numbers are. What you're trying to do is you're trying to paint Islamic terrorism as something that's not that bad, like it's not that big of a threat, so we shouldn't racially profile people, or we shouldn't, air quotes, criminalize a certain religion.
And get this, the vast majority of the terrorism in that little black box was committed by white Christian men.
Now, I hear this all the time. People say that, oh, it was a white Christian male that did it. How do you know that they're Christian? I mean, I've not heard anybody say in the mass shooting, praise Jesus before they go kill somebody, but I have heard individuals say Allahu Akbar and praise Allah.
Islamic extremists only account for 2.6% of the mass shootings in America. That is 2% of 0.5%. This means that Muslim terrorism only accounts for 0.0001% of the gun violence in our country. The Orlando shooting was literally, statistically, scientifically a 1 in 10,000 occurrence.
Okay, you say it's infrequent, and that's kind of correct, but how many times does the thing need to happen for it to be a problem? I mean, does it have to happen every Friday, every Tuesday, or whatever? I mean, black on black violence happens almost every day and nobody cares. So at what point does that become too much is too much? I mean, why can't it be we see a problem that is a consistent pattern and then do something about it before it becomes a worse problem?
Meanwhile, an unarmed black man gets shot by the police every 28 hours, almost every single day.
Now, this stat here, this is the biggest lie of the whole presentation. Now, this stat, first of all, you said the stat incorrectly. Now, Marc Lamont Hill, he was having a debate with Larry Elder back in 2014 about Ferguson, in which he was getting wrecked. And he brought up this stat that came from MXGM. That's the Malcolm X grassroots movement. Now, what Marc Lamont Hill said was that unarmed black males get shot and killed every 28 hours by a police officer or a vigilante. Now, what MXGM did was they looked at TV, news articles, online newspapers, etc., and then they came up with people that fit their criteria, and then they put it together and divided that number by 8760, which is the total number of hours in a year, and voila, you have every 28 hours a black male is unarmed and killed by a police or a vigilante. But my thing is this: what is a vigilante? I don't know. Do you? I mean, are you including black people that take the law into their own hands, if that's what a vigilante means? Or are you only including white people? Are you including security officers? Like, what does that really mean? It's a number that doesn't make any sense, that was devised by people that just pretty much on their couch making up numbers. I can come up with the same number and then present it to you as fact, but it's not really. I looked at the Washington Post and I found a more accurate number, and I have the full interactive chart in the description box below, but I pasted a screenshot of it for you on the screen right now, and you can see that there were only 36 blacks killed while unarmed that were men in 2015 compared to 31 whites that were killed. Now, you could still say, oh, well, it's still disproportionate because blacks only account for 13% of the population and whites account for about 65. But what you also don't know is that blacks and whites kill police officers at about the same rate, right? You can see the chart before you, and you can see that the white number is a little bit higher than the black, but that white number is falsely ballooned because you also have Hispanics in there as well. But even if it was just blacks and whites, you still see that the white number is less than the population percentage and the black number is much higher than the population percentage. And like I said before, we commit 52% of all murders. So really, in truth, it's almost an argument to be made that our numbers are lower than our representation as far as our criminality is concerned.
We've got way bigger fish to fry. This video isn't necessarily to get you to not vote for Donald Trump. We don't care about that. We just want you to think for yourself.
Well, thank you, sir. I do think for myself and speak for myself. And, this talk definitely let me get some thoughts out. I appreciate you for making it. Shout out to you. Whatever you do in the future with your group, Archduke or whatever y'all do, I say more power to you. Unfortunately, you had a lot of inconsistencies and fallacies and lies in this talk, but I was able to come clear it up for you. So hopefully we good. So if you're listening to me talk, what do you think about what I said? Do you think I'm on point with my assertion of what he said? Are my facts wrong? Are my facts right? If you have any sources to debunk what I said, I say go for it. If you like what I said, then let me know in the comments below. And that's all I got to say for this video. If you like what you heard, please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. Peace.